All right, now we're starting. So we were just talking about. You said you went into Starbucks.
Hold on. Don't start yet. I need to know. I should have put cream on my legs. I should have shaved them too. Okay, anyways. Okay, so let's start.
No, you're good. I mean, we can always.
No, we're editing that out.
Yeah. Well, it's fine. It's good to that there. Cream on the legs. We're in. Okay.
Okay.
So tell us about your recent Starbucks thing, then we'll dive in. So you were just talking about that.
Yeah, that it's so unfortunate that I was
Sorry.
that's definitely gonna be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand why guys do that.
Let's
Like,
talk about that.
yeah, no, seriously, why do guys do that? Is it to
I
impress girls? Is it because it's they like it, they feed off it, or
mean, I think it does. There's
It's like-
definitely something about like driving a car fast or a motorcycle or something that like feels good. But to do it in an area like this, in like a little city where like people are crossing left and right, all like that, I would never do. So I don't know why they do it. Maybe I don't know. Like on a highway, I would do it. Like it feels good.
I don't know either, and I always questioned it, but you know, in the end, if they're happy, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, the other day, like around a month ago, I encountered this homeless person that came into Starbucks, and the barista automatically was like, "You cannot be in here, get out!" And I turned around and I looked at him, and I'm like, "What?" I think it's the new policies that they have. It was all over the news with Starbucks that some homeless people were sitting down, or there were two black people that were sitting down and they thought that they were homeless and they went to kick them out. And that caused do you remember that?
That was a little while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. So
Yeah.
now Starbucks is apparently the policy is that they can't have homeless people.
Yeah.
And you know, it's very unfortunate because of the fact that this is the society that we live in, and it's that we judge on appearances. We definitely do, and it's very unfortunate because when I was homeless in Wynwood, and this was like 2016, I was sleeping in community parks, you know, inside slides, you know, like where people didn't see me, and it was a very dangerous area because it was right next to Little Haiti, which is where I escaped one night, getting almost gang raped and killed.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the days I would hang out. What do homeless people do? That's a really interesting schedule if you want to.
I'd actually, tell us about that.
If your whole day, you don't have to work. I mean, at that point, I was too immersed in drugs to even be working. So a lot of the people that are homeless, it is true that they're addicted to drugs, but that within itself, people don't have compassion for that. They're like, oh, you know, like I don't want to give them money because they're going to spend it on drugs. But when you're deep in drugs, it is something that we wish that you can actually have somebody be like, hey, listen, what's going on? Do you need somebody to talk to? Not once did somebody help me. Not once did somebody ask me what was wrong. But here's also why, because I didn't look the part. I still dressed with the clothes that, you know, that I've always had. And, you know, like I would go in, and what happened is that I didn't look homeless because of the fact that I carried a graphing calculator around in a backpack, my journal. So I would sit in different areas. Like, for example, I would go to Starbucks and I wasn't kicked out. Why? Because I didn't look the part. And I was homeless at that point. And, you know, what I would do is that I would wake up, I would walk every single day so much. All I would do is explore and talk inside my head, like literally have conversations with myself inside my head.
I do that now.
Yeah.
I do that a lot.
It's fun. Exactly. It's a lot of fun, especially when you get into characters and you start, you know, going into different personas and different, you know, voices. And it is not schizophrenia. And a lot of people, they're like, oh, do you hear voices inside your head? I'm like, yeah, but they're all mine, you know. And they're like, do they tell you to kill yourself? And this was when I was in psych wards. They were like, do these voices tell you to kill yourself? I'm like, no. They tell me mathematically, like, where we come from. And they were like, that's manic right there. And I'm like, okay But let's get back to the homeless part. Was that I would roam the streets a lot. I would. I dipped down into 113 pounds, which for me is very, very, very skinny.
Oh,
My
okay.
bones were like protruding out. It was something scary. But I would just sit around and basically just write and do a lot of math formulas. That's what I used to do. And in a sense, you know what? It was liberation of the fact that you weren't in a schedule. You were just enjoying life. You know?
Do you feel like those math formulas were like coming to you from something, or they were already within you? Like, how do you, like, where did that come from? Like these math formulas?
They came from other people.
Oh, so you were like actively learning from others at this time too, or
they
like
all
yeah.
they all came to me, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
You know, until I pass away, then I will be in the realm of the metaphysical realm where time is non-existent, and I can say like, okay, I can see the past, present, and future, and I can observe my life from a different perspective of higher frequency.
Yeah.
But until we die, all we can do is speculate about everything.
Yeah.
You know, about absolutely everything. And these equations and just the math that the ideas that I hold about the origins of existence, of time, space, reality, virtual reality, yeah, they all come, I believe, from another place. But this place, since we are all consciousness of the source, which is what I call God, and we are all like, imagine that there's like God, okay, and then consciousness, and consciousness is everything. Okay, everything that can possibly happen, every experience that can happen in infinity. Okay, and what happens when we're born is that we are like children of this source. Okay, and we come out and boop, we live our life, and then we go back in to put in that data, if you want to call it that, like the motherlode computer data, the information of us, of what we did while we lived here, all our experiences, and all that information goes back into that data until infinitely, all possibilities start going into that data, and it forms existence, which is infinite. Okay,
and so we'll never run out of possible like data points.
And that is what is mind-blowing, is that if that is the case, then that means that this computer, that it just, the type of power and capacity and RAM memory that it needs to have is so exponential that we can't possibly even imagine. And how can we actually get there? Right now, technology just started, but imagine in 10,000 years where we could be.
Imagine, I know. I think like even 10 years.
Exactly.
Like it's crazy what 10 years.
Exactly.
So yeah. 10,000, I can't even comprehend. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Do you have any ideas in 10,000 years? Like I literally cannot even comprehend. Like I think we'll be pretty much fully robotic at that.
Well, we can only predict, but when we predict the future, we're also creating it.
Because, that's a good one. That's worth tweeting.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll give you credit.
You have a Twitter? I didn't know that. I haven't used mine in.
Oh, I don't use it.
Freshman college. Yeah. Wow.
I don't know why. I never got into Twitter, so I don't really use it, but I do have one. So. Right. I always, whenever I hear something like awesome like that, I'm like, that's a tweet.
Yeah.
That's good. So.
Yeah. And also, it's words, and especially feelings. Feelings is how we manifest our reality or our desires.
Yeah.
But if I could predict what would happen in the future, is I believe that we are artificial intelligence. We are robots already.
Okay.
But very sophisticated robots, where we created that in the future and then immersed. Okay, so when I was 18, somebody in NYU asked me, a friend, Seb, do you want a mushroom pizza? And I'm like, yeah. I didn't know it had psychedelic mushrooms. I didn't know that it was. Mushroom. Yeah, it wasn't. No, and it wasn't just a little bit. It was like a lot in it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, like, afterwards, you notice that they look different. Okay, it doesn't look like regular mushrooms like that. but they were cut up and they were like melted within the cheese. And it was, I think, 4 grams. I have no idea how much was in there, but I went to the other side. And when I was in the other side, I ended up in the hospital. I ended up in the hospital because I was, that's a story that I actually have on a YouTube from forever ago. I ended up naked in Washington Square Park. It was snowing. No. Yeah. This is another story. I have to put that inside my manuscript.
Okay.
And I ended up doing a snow angel while naked. And NYU police just stood over me, and he's like, "What are you doing?" Like I was like fully naked, like nothing, like absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm just there, and the only thing that I could say was I looked up, like Jesus about to be like crucified, and I just look up at him, and I'm like, "Oh, well, hello there, Captain."
Is that hello, Captain? Hello, Captain. That's funny.
He took me to a psych ward.
Oh,
because he figured out that something was up, right?
Yeah, the captain.
And
threw him off.
yeah, it was just like this girl
Captain.
is under the influence of something. But something significant happened while I was at the hospital. And that was that I saw people rising from their beds, the hospital beds, and they just took their virtual reality helmet off. And they were like, "Game over." They kept saying, "Game over." And so to me, what I think is happening is that this is an illusion that we are creating in our minds, and inside is like built within us is the virtual reality glasses. Okay, so like basically we see this, but imagine the virtual reality like being immersed within our inside our like face. Okay.
Yeah.
And this happened, this just occurred to me the other day. It was like, what if we are artificial intelligence? What if we got created robots, but then it got so sophisticated when that we eventually evolved into this?
Yeah.
And then I started questioning, and I said, well, if that is the case, then how can you explain evolution? You know? If we're immersed inside virtual reality, and let's say we're inside a virtual reality room, and I've done many sketches about this experience, like how the virtual reality room looked like, how the helmets look like, and I was only gone in my life for a couple of minutes, and it was years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so that within itself is very, very interesting of how that works. When I took the most powerful hallucinogenic DMT, the spirit molecule, as soon as I took it, I went into a room, the same room that I was in, but then all of a sudden it just felt like it was the reprogramming room where you create yourself, where you create what I call your sim.
Your sim. Okay.
Yeah.
What's that?
Okay, have you ever
like a SIM card?
Kind of. You're getting close. Have you ever played The Sims?
I have, yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. So you literally felt like you were like almost had like a different view of yourself, and you could like maneuver and change anything in your life that you wanted.
Well,
and then go back in.
This video, I will link it. And I got filmed while I did DMT, and I asked who God was. I'm like, I want to meet God. Because I've always been very curious from a math perspective, from a physics perspective. I was very curious on who God is, and most importantly, not who it is, but I just wanted to know the ego side of it, wanted to know whether it was a woman or a man.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was what I initially wanted to know. So I'm in camera, like taking the DMT and going, who was God? I started traveling faster than the speed of light, or maybe those flashes meant that I was either traveling or that they were coming at me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Okay, exactly. And I ended up going, and I was like, how was I going faster than the speed of light? And then the filmmaker, somebody that was very experienced with psychedelics, a Japanese guy, he told me, well, listen to this. What is faster than light? And he goes, consciousness.
Ah, okay. Another tweet.
Yeah, another tweet right there.
That's good.
Yeah, so I asked to meet God, and I don't know if it's just a specific experience, but later on I meditated a lot and it's accurate. Is I looked at myself. I was like, oh, let me play back, like the experience. Let me see how you filmed it, right? So then I was there and I was looking at myself in the past in that tiny screen of the camera, and I was asking to meet God.
Yeah.
And there was just a realization that, oh my God, this is my creation, and now I'm the creator. It's a snake eating its own tail. The creation and the creator are one of the same.
Yeah.
God created God, and we are God, all of us. And that within itself, just it was a mind blow. It was mind expanding, and my consciousness just went to another level because of the fact that I realized that if we are God, we carry infinite potential to be who we want to be. We can create our reality. We have the same power as, if you want to call it God,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
God is all of us together.
Yeah.
The accumulation of everybody,
Mhm.
and
So
yeah,
do you think we'll ever figure out how to live forever? What are your thoughts on
we already have.
that? We already have? Explain what you mean.
If we live forever, that means that right now there's another version of me in the future playing this game, this virtual reality game, and time is twisted there.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where time is a perception that you can't really put your finger on it, of how
Okay.
much time is passing by here in this realm and how much time is passing by in the future in virtual reality. So I mean, can we, if infinity is, it does exist, and I believe it does,
Yeah, yeah.
then that means that we can definitely live forever. We're just gonna get our memories wiped in every single lifetime. Like, for example, we will always live. We will always reincarnate and incarnate infinitely times.
Yeah.
Okay? The only question is, oh my God, this is why 3 hours of sleep,
It's
Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And I'm here, I'm talking about like really complex like stuff.
No, yeah.
Hold on. So yes, we can live forever. We already do. But in terms of one lifetime, I think that we can, it is a possibility,
Yeah.
but it's a possibility that I don't see happening until maybe 200 to 300 years from now. However, we will have the capability of doing it within the next 50 to 100 years. However, a lot of inventions are controlled by the government.
Yeah.
So they have their own agenda. And we can do so many things right now. Like, for example, cars, we can have flying cars right now. We can have tubes that can be flying, train systems or something that are much more economical. But how much do you make in insurance? How much do you make in tolls?
Yeah.
Tolls, they're probably going to like tax the sky. It's like,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
sky tax,
Yeah, yeah.
How much do you make in gasoline? How much are you making in dealerships? So it is an industry that it's not in their interest to build these innovative concepts and
Yeah.
inventions, because it is all business.
Yeah.
So could it be a possibility? Yes, and we can see it. However, it's not going to get approved.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. So I want to talk to you about, because I know what you did last night.
What did I do last night? Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny.
Which is the reason why I only slept 3 hours.
Yeah.
My mind just went.
So you watched the Joe Rogan Alex Jones interview.
Yes, I
So
did.
let's start with, like, what was one highlight? Like, what was one thing that really caught like your attention from that interview? It is 4 hours long, so.
Okay, I'm gonna go into the subjects of it
Okay.
and what he talked about. However, I first have to say something about the delivery of his messages.
Okay.
And I say this because, Alex Jones, if you ever listen, I say this from the heart, just because I have been in your spot, and to deliver messages in that type of emotion, and I know that it comes from a place of frustration that people are all asleep. You
Yeah,
know?
I think you said too.
However, and I say this from the heart, if you ever see this, okay?
Yeah.
He is doing it from a place of feeling attacked, okay? And feeling that he needs to prove himself, okay?
Mhm.
And a lot of the times his mind works at a rate that is exponential, like off the charts.
Yeah.
And for somebody, and that is something that I also have to work on, for somebody that is a normal type of perception, and by normal I mean that it's not off the charts at his level,
Yeah.
to understand what he is saying, they're not going to grasp all of it. They're going to, I mean, like 100%. They're going to grasp maybe 85% to 90%. But to really communicate like effectively, he needs to slow down. That's number one. And I know that's
Yeah,
very
it's
hard.
fast. Yeah.
But then the most important aspect that I see is the fact that he's operating, and this is maybe assumption, but this is also from personal experience. And as an empath, I feel the emotion of others. And it got to the point where I'm like, oh my God, there's so much anger here. And I felt very uncomfortable,
Okay.
you know, because I'm very sensitive
Yeah.
to, and I can feel what others feel. And that's called empathy,
Yeah.
by the way.
And we should dive into that then at some point.
Of course. And I understand why he's angry. And I was as well. And I understand it. But when you come from that place of anger, it is something that he needs to be more confident with his information and his ideas. And the way that he can efficiently deliver it is through having, and I know this is going to sound very, very, how do you call this? Controversial.
Okay.
But you should have compassion for the people that are banning him because they're asleep and they're the ones that are suffering the most.
Mm-hmm.
And he's speaking the truth. And even YouTube is, I saw the comments afterwards. I went through, a bunch of comments, and they were all stamping how many views it had because YouTube is now trying to take off views, it's already like at 11 million.
Yeah, it was like one of the
No,
top
it
views.
is, yeah, and I think that it's going to reach very, very high.
Yeah.
But YouTube is now trying to censor it and try to not have so many views and taking away likes so that it's he's not doing anything wrong there. It's freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And they try to block him, in all social media sites. And here he is with Joe Rogan, and they can't do anything. They can't take it down because it's freedom of speech.
Yeah, it's been seen, and now if they took it down, it'd be too late. Like that would cause so much.
And I think that other people, that's something I'm gonna do. I'm gonna save it to a hard drive, like download it and save it to a hard drive in case it does get taken down.
Yeah.
So.
So if you want to get into it, I'm curious, like what your thoughts are as like a woman. One of the big things he talked about was the abortion.
Oh,
so,
yes.
I think like.
Oh, but I don't know if I want to talk about that because that's something very personal.
Yeah.
And
that's fair.
And it's something that and not religion so much because I'm more spiritual.
Yeah.
But I think that my stance on abortion, I'm going to keep to myself. Just
That's
because
fair.
I don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
And that is something that is very personal. I mean, because it is something so sensitive to people because, I can't say it. Maybe one day I will.
I like that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I want to talk about the empathy thing, but before we get to the empathy, I want to talk about, do you remember when in the interview he spoke about like the elves? Do you know, like when everybody would take ayahuasca and they'd all see the same thing? Do you remember that part?
Yeah, I took a.
What are your thoughts there?
Okay,
I think that sometimes when people do DMT, I think they also see that.
Oh, it's gonna be watered down, but I think I need some. I'm crashing a little bit, and this is a conversation that.
Need some brain power. Yeah.
Oh, good. Do you mind?
No, go for
it. I'm
Pause. Yeah, you can actually finish it.
Okay, so I'm sorry, come again?
The elves.
Okay, so you know what's very interesting is the fact that after big pharma didn't work for me, me, destroyed my mind, physically altered my chemicals in my brain, I was desperate and I didn't want to die. And there was so much suicide attempts that I was like, I was willing to try anything. So I tried mushrooms once when I was a freshman at NYU, and that happened. So since then, I was like, never again. Like that was just like a horrendous experience.
You saw the elves with that, or oh, you're talking about the story you told earlier.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So okay, so this was around 2 years ago. I went on 4 different sessions of psychedelics. Oh, hold on, the wind's going through. I'm gonna edit this out because then it's like right now it's really gonna be like.
Yeah, it might. That is actually like I think it's kind of like a wind protector.
A what?
Wind, it's like protects that the black thing on top.
We should have it like with like a cone, like a half cone type of thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
You gotta like get one that like attaches here and like comes up.
Oh but yeah.
This is so.
They actually have that.
Yeah, but this is so like your bees. It does protect the wind, I think. So I think it's not too bad.
Okay. So I did 4 sessions of psychedelics, and after that, I mean, I am 90% out. Okay, and 3 of them were magic mushrooms. No, 2 of them were magic mushrooms. One was LSD, and the other one was DMT.
Yeah.
So nice little mix there. And so in one of the mushroom trip, I was in South Point Beach in Miami Beach.
Yeah.
And beautiful place. I would say trip obviously in mushrooms, but in nature.
Oh yeah.
It is something completely different. And while I was there, I was with somebody else, and all of a sudden we see the exact same thing, which is we saw a ship.
Yeah.
It was just a ship, a cargo ship, and it was going out. But then all of a sudden, like a black blob from it just like went up to the sky, and then it opened up, and there was a city within the blob. It was like a black canvas. There was a city that went within, and then that city started to like morph like inwards like that. So it was like a mirrored dimension. And that's when I realized, I'm like, oh my God, this is the 3rd dimension. That's 2. So it's 3 plus 2. That's the 5th dimension. We were immersed in the 5th dimension.
Yeah.
And we both saw it. And I was just blown away. I'm like, how did we see the same thing? You know, it was
interesting.
It was super interesting. And I couldn't. And that is something that is a concept that is very far out. And I know that Alex Jones talked about this, but the only way that I can rationalize that is that when we're together, for example, we sync in mind, in energy, because we are all connected, okay? As I said, I didn't actually finish that, but with God consciousness, okay? So when we are all the same, like we're all God, okay? Yeah. I already lived through you, and you already lived through me. We're just in this experience of linear time where there's a separation of bodies, but it's just the illusion of the self.
Yeah.
Okay? So when you take psychedelics and you're in a group of people, what I theorize that happens is that the minds sync and you become one consciousness.
Okay.
So you become one consciousness, and then from that consciousness, get the same experiences. That's at least, does that explain?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's what I think happened. And I have been watching a lot of videos about the machine elves, because I'm like, what are the machine elves?
Yeah.
Personally, I've never seen them.
Yeah, I think it's mostly with like ayahuasca. It can happen on DMT, but it's mostly like what he was talking about is like there's been multiple times where like 40 people do an ayahuasca ceremony and they all see these elves, and like it unlocks things, and like the elves tell them secrets of the universe, things like that. So
well, I think maybe that I'm an elf like in real life. No, I'm
elf.
kidding.
No.
I'm kidding. I'm the machine elf. No, I'm kidding.
No.
I'm completely kidding. But because if they get secrets told about the universe and about existence and time and space and how we're controlled, I already get that,
Yeah.
naturally. So maybe when I trip on psychedelics, maybe they choose, who they go for. Like they choose, these machine elves. They're like, okay, they're able to see us. They're in a frequency where we can communicate with them.
Yeah.
So they go to them because otherwise, without the psychedelics, they cannot see them. Okay.
Got it,
Whereas, for example, for me, I have that information. Okay. And then when I trip on psychedelics, I go very in depth into gaining information by my own mind about the information that I already get. So, for example, the last time that I tripped on mushrooms, which was over, I would say like 2 years ago, it was New Year's, and it was absolutely fantastic because in the end, I came back to my desktop, and I was just in complete awe of everything that I saw. And I closed my eyes, and I was trying to get to the origin of God, and I came to a light, and this light is a laser light. And this laser light, so all the knowledge that I have of math, physics, it all combines when I take these trips, and it makes me go in depth and theorize, and then get ideas to then come back and prove it through math.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this laser light, it only went, it's called a subpixel, where it would generate. And I was inside this computer, okay? I was inside the quantum computer, if you want to call it. And I became that laser light. And what I saw was that it was rendered in subpixel. And what was rendered? Ones and zeros, binary code. The information of what gets sent from the computer generator to this computer simulation. Mm-hmm. And so when you talked, Alex Jones, about the machine elves, I've never encountered them, but maybe that's a way to explain why I haven't encountered them.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And I think, his thing, what's interesting is like it's either one of the two, right? Either all the minds, like you're saying, are getting connected, so they're seeing that, or maybe it could be both. Or he says that he doesn't think that's what it is. He says, like, if everybody's seeing the same thing, then it has to be that you're like entering a new dimension. Like the psychedelic is removing the filters,
yeah,
and then that's what is actually there. And then I guess if you go into it, I mean, I don't know how many dimensions there are. Is there an amount, or is it just like unlimited? So it's like, okay, let's say that you saw the fifth dimension. Like, so you got
so far they it's difficult because as a mathematician and I'm not a physicist, like, I don't have a degree, but I'm self-taught, so I don't know how you call it, like I'm how do you call it, undegreed physicist, if you want to call it that. So for me, I have to look at it from two perspectives, from the logical perspective and then from the intuitive and channeled perspective of the ideas that I get sent to me. So for me, it's something that logic, math, and physics tells me that there's 10 dimensions. And the closer that you get to the 10th dimension, the more you are into the information side of reality. Each dimension has its own laws that is governed by. Okay? So that is what the logical math side says. Okay?
Yeah.
Now the intuitive side, I say that there's infinite dimensions.
Yeah, that's what I more feel.
Yeah. And I believe that physical dimensions happen in Fibonacci sequence. And I've already talked about this in other podcasts, but I do believe that physical dimensions exist in the first dimension, and there's two first dimensions. It's one, and I'll tell you why later. Second, third, fifth, 13, 21, and so on. And that's the Fibonacci sequence, okay?
Okay.
And in between those dimensions, so for example, between the third and the fifth is like 4, between the fifth and the eighth is 6 and 7, and so on. Those in between dimensions are all information fields that fuels the information for the rendering of the next dimension.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Okay, so that's
That's cool.
yeah, so that's having a little bit of mathematics and immersed with the ideas that I get to somehow make sense
Yeah.
of that theory that I have.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's infinite dimensions.
Okay, so you do, even though the math logical side says 10, like you would agree or you believe the other one. Like
That is my theory, and
okay.
I right now I have too much going on, but whenever I release this book and I have
Yeah.
the royalties coming in,
Yeah.
I am gonna be chilling out,
Figuring this
3
out.
months just doing formulas and trying to prove that
Yeah.
theory that I have through
Yeah.
math and physics.
And we're excited about that. At least I am.
To say the least.
Yeah.
And and once I do that, where was I going with this? I don't know.
A glitch in the matrix. That's fun.
But yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. No. I think it was just explaining, like, so you believe infinite dimensions. That's where it was.
Yes.
But so one last thing I want to touch on for this interview here is empathy. So like, there's like Facebook groups out there that are like for empaths, like empaths.
And I'm part of one.
Yes.
I'm sorry, keep going.
No, I think I'm part of a few potentially as well. I don't communicate them too much. I don't know why. I've just never really got into them. But like, I would say myself, I'm like way more on the, like, if there's a spectrum, like I feel way more than I don't know. What's the other side? What's the other side?
Apathy.
Okay, so like, say if somebody is like the opposite of us, they're not a feeler too much, because that's how I would kind of associate myself. Like, I'm like you. If you put me, like, Ultra Music Festival's coming up, you put me in there, I'm down to have I might have a breakdown. Like, it's too much crazy energy all happening at once, and I can't take it. So like, I don't go to those things anymore. When I was younger, somehow I guess I wasn't aware of it as much, so I was able to do that. But so yeah, it's just, my question to you is like, how do you cope as an empath? Like, I feel like being an empath is a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Okay.
So it's
okay. I've had my good practice with it since I discovered that I was an empath.
Yeah.
And what is interesting is that, I am a part of a group of empaths. It's called Empaths Living Large in the Matrix.
Okay.
However, I'm going to say this from a place of experience and of healing that I've already gone through, is that a lot of these posts that they make, like the members, they all just want justification, and they're going from a victim mentality. So, they all just want people to care about them and, see like, oh, I'm sorry you're going through this. And they're like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm hurt. But it's also going from a perspective that they blame empathy for how they feel, when they don't realize that those emotions are absorbed.
Yeah.
Okay? Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, well,
like,
elaborate a little bit more.
Okay,
those emotions are absorbed.
Okay, so let's say you're surrounded by somebody that's depressed, okay? Somebody that's very toxic. So you absorb that and you morph into that as an empath. And instead of working through that, they just blame it on empathy. They're like, oh, I'm feeling this way because I'm an empath. And I know, because I used to be there. I used to be in that spot, and I used to be like, oh, when I first found out I was an empath. Before, it also comes to the point that I even said in the group once, I don't even post that much. I just, I observe of what they're saying. And one of the posts that I did when I joined in, like years ago, was that I said, I wonder how many empaths were labeled bipolar, because they don't realize that all these emotions that are occurring to them, they're not theirs, they're somebody else's. So there's like an instability in their emotions.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay,
that makes sense.
So that's the first question that I asked. And then, I started realizing that a lot of them, they're using empathy as a crutch to not spiritually grow. And to me, the way that I overcame that was saying, let it sink in, those emotions, acknowledge that they're there, don't resist, and then release them. And that is through higher awareness of knowing that they're not yours. They're not your emotions. So meaning that, just let them go. They're not yours. And when you're an empath, you tend to want to fix other people. That's another mistake, is that you start going like you want to control and fix other lives. And in spiritual bypass, you get a sense of worth of helping other people instead of first helping yourself. You get like, oh, I feel good because I'm helping somebody, so I feel better about myself.
Yeah.
And that in itself is like, no, you need to first feel good and heal yourself before you heal others.
Yeah, agree with that.
So, I mean, empathy is just having compassion and, feeling for other people's, sufferings.
Would you say we all have it, but just some of us have like a lot more naturally? Can it be learned?
I have a problem with the word learned.
Okay.
Okay. I would say it would be better way of saying it that you can consciously wake up, and when you wake up and you realize how bad of a, I don't want to say how bad of a person, but in such negative low vibrations that you've been, like anger, pride, envy, one of the first things that you need to do is forgive yourself because you didn't know any better. And a lot of people, when they wake up, they start getting a lot of anger, and they're like, oh my God, because they also are holding on to that comfort zone. So I think that people can be empaths if they first decide to change and realize that you are me and I am you. We're all the same.
Yeah.
Okay? When we realize that, why am I going to hurt you if that's me in another life?
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
a great point. I know.
So
that's what I remember having like a realization like that.
So I think it's through going into higher awareness that empathy can be developed. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I think we should do because I think like the topic of empathy, we could dive pretty deep into that, just in how to like even live. I mean, there's whole Facebook groups on it, right? So like it's obviously a topic of discussion. So is there anything else that you'd like to mention besides your book on this one? I feel like we covered some pretty cool topics.
No, yeah, we definitely did. This was a lot of science and dimensions, and it was good. It was good. Yeah, machine elves.
Always good to throw that in there.
I'm the machine elf.
So
another thing that's good.
Yeah. How's the book coming along? Good?
Yeah.
You're writing?
Lately I've had a writer's block, and by lately I mean like the past like 3-4 days.
Okay.
However, it is going really well. It is going really well, and I can't wait to share it. But it's also, I didn't think it was going to be this hard. Not because of, my ability to write. I'm very good at expressing myself. But, writing this book made me realize that I haven't fully healed yet, because there's points that they're very traumatic to talk about.
Yeah.
For example, I'm just going to give a few.
Yeah.
When I was escaping, getting gang raped and killed, well, I got roofied, you know? That in itself is something very traumatic. Times that I was homeless and having to admit that, Also, whenever I would get sent to the psych ward and I would be, an ambulance would be called, and I would be like, getting out of like, buildings and people staring at me while I was like, just going really bad.
Yeah.
The times I was in psych wards, what I saw and how I was treated. So all of these things, they're traumatic, and I thought that I got over them.
Yeah.
But they're hard to write about.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the people so the book's coming out sometime soon. But for the people that want to
summer.
Summer.
I think
is that the commitment? Yeah. Okay, summer.
2019.
Y'all heard it, summer.
Yeah.
But for the people that want to be notified, we do have a landing page for the book.
Yes.
So we'll link that below the video.
Yes, that is perfect.
If you want to say what it is too.
Yeah, exactly. So I just started a subscriber, if you want to call it that, website. It's thedaughterofhe.com. And in it, I also have excerpts of manuscript of a little bit about who I am, what I went through, and then the first chapter of the book is in there as well. I also have other podcast interviews that I've done with Tyler of Authors Unite in that webpage. And then the main webpage is going to be in the bottom to subscribe your email or to submit it, so that once the book does come out, that you will get a notification of an email saying, okay, The Daughter of He is released.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're
And,
pumped. And
yeah.
I can just say that you should definitely opt in just for that first chapter too, because then you'll be waiting. So
Yeah, no,
it's
and
good.
it's yeah,
It's awesome. So
it's an awesome. Yeah, it's going to be a great book, and you know, the most important thing as a writer is to write from the heart, and it's very hard to write sometimes because the ego gets in the way.
yeah.
Yeah, so the most important thing is to write from the heart, and just, you know, it's so cliche that a lot of people get confused on what it is, but it basically just means be your true self, and don't be afraid of showing who you are, and being afraid of judgment, because only you can dictate yourself.
Oh yeah, that's a mic drop. Take it. Thanks for chatting with us, Steph.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me in your podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was
And we can end with that.